first. Now we will start with Paola from Bioneuromodulation Lab. Her talk title is Neurocorrelates of Free Will Revisited. Stage is yours, Paola.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And can you see the slides?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Can somebody please give me a warning when I'm approaching the 12 minutes so that I can, if I'm late, I'm going to scroll the slides.
I will do that.
Thank you. So thank you so much. You're looking at a slide which summarizes a poster. This poster is just one quick overview of the talk which I'm giving today, and I had 1 minute for that poster, so 12 minutes is actually quite luxurious. So free will. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this topic. So why am I speaking about free will today? Is because it's the single most important fundamental right. In the US, they even have a First Amendment which talks about, the freedoms, and free will is very fundamental. Humans are the product of their free will, which is also the foundation of all ethics. So there are some free will deniers, which have come from science in the last decades. And I think there has been a way of imposing this mechanistic view that humans are like animals and they act mechanistically. But this is important for me to look more into this, and I think there is an opportunity to do so today. Thank you to neuroscience as well, to the advances in imaging and stuff. So there has been political misuse and misinterpretation, I think, of science, of this free will, and it's important to try to put it right. And there is big comeback on the topic of free will. I thank the Atlantic. I put out an article which summarizes the issues, which I link to. If anyone wants to read it, I encourage that. So this talk is very quickly introducing and revising the classical argument against free will, and I'm presenting a view, an alternative view, which is going towards possible new theory. I'm a systems disclaimer. I'm a systems researcher. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I apologize in advance for not using maybe the appropriate languages and constructs. And also, my analysis is mostly based on literature, on other people's research. So what methods do I adopt? I'm doing now systemic review and meta-analysis. So anyone who has done systemic reviews and meta-analysis is about reviewing the data which has already been published. Is often overlooked. There are still a lot of people putting a lot of effort in doing fundamental data gathering, and which is okay, but there's a lot of data out there which needs to be analyzed and understood better. So I am drawing from different branches of neuroscience. I'm looking at what is going in that direction and analyzing. It is by all means not trivial to do systemic reviews and meta-analysis, because there are issues with the methodologies, whereby even the studies from which we draw data from need to be fairly selective and not biased. But that's a different issue. So this is broadly what I'm doing. So there are some old theories and open questions. I see there are other talks related to this topic in the session. So I will defer to them to go in more depth, but very quickly, volition versus agency. They are also called incompatibilists versus compatibilists, and they all go back to a study by Libet in 1983, which is going to be presented in more detail. And a lot of open questions still: what determines free will? What is free will, and where does it fit in neurocognition, and how does it manifest? And a lot more questions. So the studies of reference are the classical Libet studies. Which identified what is called the Bereitschaft potential, where type 1 and type 2 decisions were used to determine that some free will is actually an appearance of some kind of other decision made a priori by the brain. And there has been in the last, after Libet study, there have been a lot of studies which replicated and validated those studies. And now we can look back and say, oh, maybe this was some kind of herd behavior which needs to be investigated further also by neuroscience. So, and there is a lot of what I call free will deniers which have followed Libet. Now we have to thank, I think it's called Schurger, is it, and Dahin. There's been some, apparently Mr. Schurger or Dr. Schurger looked at this Barai shot potential again in the light of new data, and he kind of started reconsidering it. There is a link to the paper. And more recently, there's been some analysis of these new studies, volition and the brain. And then I have been lucky to read about Lavata's work, and there is a lot of interesting work coming out for which we are thankful. So I think the most important of these findings, the most important which I managed to find and to look at, are the we have been able to identify metacognition, and metacognition manifests as a kind of signal that precedes decisions. There are some studies which I list showing that metacognition is just one of the areas of research which relates very closely to free will. So we may not be able to observe free will itself because we don't know how to define it, so we cannot observe it, but we can observe decision making, metacognition, and other dynamics which are related to free will. So we can start getting close to free will. And what can we see? As far as I understand from reading the work of my colleagues, is we can see that there are common activation patterns and possible overlap of indicators and changes in certain biomarkers. So far, what I have been able to draw, conclusions that I can draw from looking at this work is that there is a system level activity. Now, I read and I learn from Michael Fox, who is one of the proponents of the network brain. I propose that I look at this, rather than a network, in addition to a network level, I see this what I call the system level, which I myself trying to identify and understand. But ultimately, it is the phenomenon of free will cannot be detected or attributed to a single activity of a single region. This is also true about other phenomena of the brain that we are not analyzing, but in this case, it's applicable to free will. So that metacognition and decision making are very closely related to free will. So we need to start looking at the data that is emerging from this research in this field. So my work is theoretical because experimental, it's very delicate and very complicated. So we do need theories, and we need to develop theories, because without the theories, we cannot justify the request for funding for the experiment. So when we are looking for equipment and want to do some research, they say, yeah, but then if the theory is Libet, then I'm not going to get the support from the research funding agencies. Many of the challenges are applicable to neuroscience as a whole, not just to free will, and are, in my experience so far, it's difficult to differentiate between healthy. So there is still work to be done in understanding whether this research applies or how it applies to healthy patients versus patients who have some conditions, because the definition of mental health itself is very feeble. So, even super healthy individuals may not have all the cognitive functions always available for testing when we need them. The resting state is, not easy to to really rely on what we consider resting state. Randomness of decisions, there's certain non-random decisions which are part of this experimentation protocol so far are also very based on very big assumptions. And then, of course, the usual challenges of accessing imaging. There are no protocols, issues of privacy, ethics, finding the equipment, finding the recruit subjects, etc. So for me, it's very important to use and find existing data, which is already out there, which we can potentially leverage to provide more experimentation and support this new theory, the direction of this new theory, which, you know, I am only relating, and I've seen this work emerge from a bunch of other directions that I'm looking at. So I don't know if I've spelled the lens correctly here. I don't know. I always have it. I can't remember if you put lens with the E or without, but basically, so what are the neurocorrelates? Actually, by the way, you will have noticed that I've changed the title. You know, the title of the abstract was Neurocorrelates of Free Will, but I thought it was a bit pretentious. So the actual title now is the free will is coming back. But, you know, we can still say that, you know, what we are considering a neurocorrelate is like an indicator, and what we can observe, it really depends on the theory, and it depends on the technology available. So I'm particularly interested in learning more about the action potential, which I think could be which could be related to the Barashov potential. I haven't found information about that. I like to see someone is doing this. The indicators, the biomarkers relating to free will that I've seen relevant so far are chemical, in terms of the bold blood oxygenation level dependent. And I think electric biomarkers are going to tell us a lot if we continue the EEG studies. Maybe refine it further to understand more the correlation between different synaptic events. And I'm not looking at the genetics at all. So what will be the future work? Well, obviously this is very broad outline to consolidate the theory and actually to align the theory with other changes, paradigm shifts that we are seeing elsewhere in neuroscience and in science in general. We need new experimental protocols and establish new research collaborations, I would say, especially between those who have the data already, who have heaps of data in their databases, and those who have the new theories. So, can we, people with new theories, go and access your data? But to do that, we need your help, because the data is not readily usable without interpretation and understanding. And I think we need to divert resources to novel experiments. We need to move away from doing a lot of the funded research, which is completely pointless, which I sadly come across a lot. And we need to try to convince the funding agencies to put more money even towards the new theories, even if they're still, a bit controversial or maybe untested. So I have a very long list of references, only a few here, which was also partially reported in short without the full citation for indication. And I want to thank everyone who has encouraging me to pursue this line of work and accepting my abstract. How am I doing for time?
You have your last minute.
Okay, I'm done, but I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
We have a couple minutes for questions, and please share your questions in the question and answer panel for Paola, and we will briefly post her Twitter as well if you want to carry on asking questions to her. And Paola, one question I have in my mind is, how do you, for example, you are giving some examples throughout the decision-making processes from the neuroscience. Yes. How do you define, I mean, we know that free will is much general concept than decision making, and it can involve in many different executive functioning. And I mean, could you please elaborate that how we can, I mean, is there a way to look at the quantify the free will in more general way instead of looking for one specific function?
Well, this is part of the problems or challenges for this research, that really we don't have free will. We don't have. There is no way that free will can be defined because it's a very broad. It's a very broad behavior. It's more like a guiding principle. And when we go and look at the experiments that have been done, and again, I'm very interested to see what my other presenting colleagues have. The experiments, they have to be narrowed down to the point where their value in terms of free will, actually, what does it say about free will, is questionable, or it kind of reduces. So it depending, I've seen all sorts of experiments done, but the tapping of the finger, which is Libet's original work, it's not significant of free will in any way. So I think that's a very good question. Thank you for that. And I think this is the first task on our to-do list. Let's define a set of behaviors that we can call free will, but they should be meaningful, really. Just tapping of the fingers is bits. It was okay 40 years ago because we didn't have the technology that is available now. But now that we can look directly into almost real time, we need to set out, write out the experimental protocols, and that itself is a very big job. So let me work on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paola. Now we will move to our next speaker. He's Uri Maus.